Hi, my name is Diana. My story is about the 23 years of abuse I went through and learning how to let go of toxic parents. My mom met my stepdad the day he got out of prison. He was walking across the parking lot. My mom was so excited and I was petrified. When I was 9 years old, we moved into Pennsylvania with my stepdad. We lived in a different state at that point. I started noticing manipulation. I had heard some yelling and some verbal argument going on in the dining room. My stepdad had asked my mom to take me and her and leave and go back to my grandmother's house. And my mom just wasn't having that kind of an argument, and she asked me to come out of my bedroom, and she sat me down at the kitchen table in front of him and said, "Are you really going to do this to this little girl? She's really starting to get to know you as her dad." I felt like I was more like something they used to keep one another in the same household. It got to the point where I knew it was going to go bad. I had my cousin come over, and she was staying the night with me like a normal sleepover, and I had moved the flower vase that was on his coffee table into the kitchen so it wouldn't be in the line of the television. When my mom and my stepdad came home, he saw I moved the vase, and he threw the vase at my cousin and me, and she ran upstairs and I ran outside. And after the glass was cleaned up and my cousin left, nobody ever talked about it again. My stepdad was very verbally abusive to me growing up. A lot of the things that he would say to me would be, "Go play out on the yellow line. Why don't you kill yourself?" He would call me racial names all the time. He would call me a bitch. Anything you could possibly think of, he would come out of his mouth. I was not even in my teen years, and as I was going into my teen years, it caused a lot of bad thoughts. I've thought about killing myself because he would just tell me to do it. When my mom became an addict, it became close multiple times. It was from the time I was 11 until I moved out of the house at 15, 16 years old. He would buy specific things and count them. He would tell me that I was only allowed to eat at meal times, and if I got anything else, I was degraded and called fat and told I was useless and that I should get a job and pay for my own things because he's tired of raising in East Cleveland the N-word. If I ate anything after dinner, I would get in trouble to the point where I was locked in my room. I would lose TV privileges. He would hang up on people when they would call for me. He would stop buying things that my mom said I specifically would eat. Anytime I snuck food and I told my mom about it, my mom would tell me that's okay, I understand, and then I would just get in trouble for it because he found out anyways. I was afraid to eat. I was afraid to touch anything because he always jumped at me as if he was going to hurt me. And there are times that he has hurt me over nothing, over things I'm supposed to have as a teenager. I was never allowed out of my room, and the door was always shut. I was not allowed to have a radio. If anybody called for me, he would rip the phone out of the walls. He would leave the phone off of the hook when he wasn't home, so even if there was an emergency, I wouldn't be able to call anybody. All hours of the night, he had the phone off of the hook so I couldn't call anybody if I wanted to. There was this one specific time my grandmother had called me to talk to me after school to see if I wanted to come out to go to church that weekend, and he hit me in the face with the phone. I was in a prison camp. And then when after my sister was born, it was so much worse. She was born a month after my 15th birthday. My mom developed her addiction to pain medication after that. I turned into Melissa's mom for the first, I want to say, year and a half of her life. And then finally, I think I rebelled enough to the point where I just left. Getting abused on top of taking care of my sister, on top of trying to take care of my mom who turned into an addict. And then my stepdad, right after Melissa was born and my mom turning into an addict, he decided to move to Florida for a year. I was holding my sister, and my stepdad had come into the house because she was crying and I was going to change her diaper, and he threw a whole can of beer at me, and it was still closed, and it completely bruised up my whole entire shoulder. My stepbrother was standing there, witnessed the whole thing. The can of beer exploded on the wall behind me, and my stepdad and my stepbrother were cleaning it up. I had called my mom, and she turned around, and as she walked into the house, they were cleaning it up, but nobody ever talked about it. I just got locked into my room for the rest of the summer. It was to the point where my mom was teaching me how to lie to him so I could have a life. I was sneaking out of the house so I could go see my friends and get the basic supplies that I needed, like pads and tampons, new clothes, food sometimes. There was times I snuck out of the house in the middle of the night to go to my boyfriend's house just so his mom saved me a plate of food in her microwave. Back then, when I was still living with my mom and my stepdad, I was trying to find hope in my mom that one day she would understand that this is not exactly correct and this is not how you show love to your children. You don't let this happen. I mean, if somebody were to come after my child like that, it'd be something way different. I learned how to be a parent from my abuse. I treat my children on how I wanted to be raised growing up, not how I was raised growing up. I always had hope that my mom would see this. She never did. She would always just make up stories as to where I was going, and what I was doing to my stepdad so I could have somewhat of a normal life. And I moved out after the nail on the head at 16. A lot of that was numbness, but a lot of it was survival. It was in June of one year, my stepdad had moved my bedroom into the living room and gave my sister my room. And I am a 15, 16-year-old girl now, getting changed and properly having a whole bedroom established in the living room. With the verbal abuse and personality my stepdad portrayed on me, it gave other people the idea that they could treat me abusively as well. And when I say that, the degrees of abuse can range from 0 to 1,000. A lot of the verbal abuse that my stepdad portrayed on me and the personality and persona that he portrayed on me led a lot of people to act in the same way. From the time I was 15 to 16 years old, I was also sexually assaulted because of some of the abuse that was portrayed on me. The verbal abuse from other people when he had parties didn't help either. When I was 16, there was a lot of money arguing between my mom and my biological father. They needed to do a DNA test so she could pursue child support. My stepdad paid for the DNA test, and the test came back negative. And I lost all trust in my mother, my stepdad, and almost anybody in my life at that point. The verbal abuse after that DNA test took off. The physical abuse got so much worse because he had so much control over me at that point because I had no way out. Over the summer, I asked my grandmother if I could come over, and she let me come over for a week, and I told her everything that was going on, and she told my mom I wasn't coming back. My mom, when I was first born, never put my biological father on my birth certificate. So when I was 16, my stepdad wanted money from my biological father. A DNA test had to be forced in order to prove that he was my dad and that he could pay the back child support and a current child support order. But that traumatized me even more because I had just found out that my only saving grace was not going to be able to save me anymore. And they made sure of that. I was not allowed to have very much contact with my biological father at that point, even though he claimed he was always going to continue to take care of me. And he still does to this day. My biological father would have to pay all that back child support for 16 years. He was ready to jump on top of that and forced my mom to go into the juvenile court and order a DNA test against my biological father so he would be forced to pay that back child support. I was just nothing but a money ticket to my mom and my stepdad, because when that DNA test came back negative and my biological father was not my dad, I was abused even worse, and that is when I had to get out. He told my mom that she should just kill me or drown me in the pool. He's pushed me into the road multiple times. I've been left in places, multiple places by myself to where I've had to walk home miles away from my house. They stopped buying me school clothes altogether. I had to get a job at 15 and pay for my own school clothes and everything like that. I didn't even know anything about my period either. At 15, I figured it out from a best friend of mine, and I was sneaking over to her house to get the things I needed and learning how to take care of myself. When I was pregnant with my son, me and my stepdad had got into an argument at the top of my mom's stairs, and he tried to push me down the basement stairs. When I was also pregnant with my son, he left me at a shopping plaza and told me I was not allowed to come back to the house until I had 2 jobs and it was 95 degrees outside. I had asked him if he could take me up to Mark's so I could get a gallon of milk and grab an application. My mom had originally told me I did not have to work while I was pregnant. She told me to tell him I was getting an application so I could go get her a gallon of milk with my money. And he took me up to the shopping plaza, which was almost 11 miles away from the house, and told me I wasn't allowed to come back to the house until I had 2 jobs, and he just drove off. I had to call my mom 2 hours later when I realized he wasn't coming back for me, and she came and picked me up, and then it started a whole fight. And as him and I were arguing, he tried to push me down the basement stairs. For 7 years, my mom was an addict on pills, and I was brutalized. If I wasn't verbally a punching bag, I was physically a punching bag. She would make me lie to everybody so I could get her pills. She forced me into the emergency room faking illnesses so I could get her pills. And then when he figured out she was an addict, he became her dealer. So at that point, he was controlling her on every aspect. So not only was I getting verbally and physically abused by my mom and her addiction, he was verbally and physically abusing me just for the kicks. The final incident that made me realize that there's probably no hope between me and my mom. And this is where I realized that it's okay to break off from toxic parents in order to grow. A lot of my PTSD will be explained with what I tell you right here. I went through 23 years of this abuse, but on October 3rd of this past year, I realized that I had gotten my job where I have wanted to work my whole entire life, and I was also going to a friend's birthday party that day. Went to a roller ring after I filled out some paperwork with my new job, and I had called my mom at like 10:30 at night, and I had said, hey, it's really late. I don't want to drive 2 hours home. I'm really tired. May I come through and stay the night at your house tonight? And I'll leave first thing in the morning. She told me yes, that it was fine, that my stepdad wasn't home yet, that I could probably just run in, go downstairs, and fall asleep. I get there at 11:45, and 15 minutes later, him and my sister walk into the house. And I'm sitting in the backyard with an old friend of ours who is also a former addict, and my mom was his sponsor. So we were just having a lovely chat between the three of us. My stepdad at that point asked me what I was doing there. I explained to him I was there with my mom. She said I could stay so I didn't have to drive in the middle of the night. I didn't want to fall asleep behind the wheel. He told me he was tired of me coming to his house and impeding on his life. And I said to him, this is my grandfather's house. I'm just here visiting my mom. I'm going to leave in the morning. He hit me in the face with the bed of his crutches right here so hard. I stumbled out the back door and down this back steps. I tripped over the steel chair. It's really tall. It's one of those bar-like chairs, really tall, and it was steel. Now, don't forget this steel chair. We're going to come back to it. That friend that was there speaking to my mom, his sponsor, was sitting on the swings in the backyard. My stepdad was chasing me down the stairs. He was punching me over and over. He hit me in the back. He hit me in the back of the neck, the head, my chest. I then stumbled and hit the ground, and he kicked me with his steel toe boots on in my thighs, and I had tears in my jeans, but there were rocks in the boots or bedded in his boots, and they cut open my leg. And then I saw my mom and my sister and that friend of ours in the back trying to restrain my stepdad. And my stepdad shook off that friend of ours and my sister. My mom told my stepdad, stop, you're gonna kill her. He said, let me go and get my gun. She's going to get buried in my garden today. I said, I'm trying to leave, and he grabbed that steel chair and hit me as hard as he could in the back with it. I pulled myself up onto the fence and saw that there was a padlock on the fence, so I couldn't even get out of the backyard. My mom had his arm, and he said, let me go. And I watched her. She let him go, and he went into the house to go get a gun. When I saw him go up those stairs, I grabbed the padlock on that fence, and I grabbed the base of the fence, and I ripped it out of the house and out of the ground and threw it at everybody. And I ran across the street to the neighbor's house and started screaming inside of the Ring camera, "Hi, my name is Diana Cox. Please tell my children I love them. My stepdad is about to come out here and shoot me with his gun. Please watch what goes on and give this to the police department." As soon as my stepdad was back outside and I saw him with his weapon in his hand, I explained to him, if you come out onto the street, that is public property, and our quarterback will not have nothing on this sack. And he turned around and went back inside. And I walked to the police department without my shoes on, swallowing my own blood, realizing that I needed to just let my mom's funeral play out in my head because I was never going to see my family again. I wasn't going to survive another year in that family. And my children didn't need that too. My children are so upset that they can't see their grandparents anymore, but they would rather have me. It's only me for both of my children, and both of them have autism. And had something happened to me, my mom and my stepdad would have both of my children. And they would have went through the same abuse I went through my whole entire life. All the hope that I've waited for so long was not even there. My mom was a lost cause. I knew at that point in time that when I was 9 years old is the day I lost my mom. It wasn't that day in October. I lost her back when I was even still a child, when I needed her the most. My mom and I haven't lived with each other since I was 16. If we don't have 100 miles in between each other, there is so much toxicity. It's scary. I've lived over 2 hours away from her for over 8 years. But I will say this, October 3rd of 2023, I left that driveway and I haven't exactly thought about her since, except that I played her funeral in my mind. I have no love lost. Like, it's been dead for so long. The love I needed from her, I learned how to give it to myself. I will say this, and I say this to a lot of people who don't know me or have not met me. I was never heard as a child. I'll be heard now, and if you don't hear my children, you're gonna hear me for them. I will be the voice that they don't have because I know what they're thinking. I was that child once. If I'm not being heard, I'm not keeping my peace at all. I'm just keeping your peace. It's been a long time going through this abuse and going through the therapy and raising my children and making sure that nobody is hurting them. I can tell you this, and I can say this with a strong sense of being a woman. Women are very resilient, and we're very, very strong creatures. Although we go through abuse and we go through these trials and we go through these tribulations, there's one book in the Bible, and I understand there are many religions, but I, being a Christian woman, believe the book of Job. You can lose everything and you can get it all back. Okay, I've lost it all. But I can say this. I'm standing here now, and I have both of my kids who love me. The pain and the passion, I can honestly say I'm standing here and I can still smile every day at my children and love them with a whole heart. I love them how I wish I was loved. And if I can love them how I wish I was loved, nobody's going to love them any better than I can. February 15th, I got the chance to speak, and I'll take power in this one too. And I hope somebody else can. And if you can't learn anything, because if you feel you can't learn anything, let me say that, please just listen to your own voices in your head. I, on February 15th, had to stand in front of the judge and explain to him with my victim impact statement, I know he's not going to jail. And he didn't. He got probation. But I told that story about what happened on October 3rd. A lot of what you heard here today, I explained to the judge in my victim impact statement. But I also told that judge, and I'm going to tell you guys here today, I was raised on both sides of the law. I had a man who raised me with good values. My biological dad, he had great values, and my grandmother, a Christian woman who raised me. But then I had the other side of the law, who I was raised by a convicted felon, and my mom, who was an addict. I'm standing here and I'm telling you, okay, being raised on both sides of it, it's hard to be on that side of it's hard not to be over there with him and being in jail and not causing problems and not being a violent person myself. It is hard. But I told the judge, I laid my trauma with him there in my victim impact statement. And when I walked out of those doors, I closed the courtroom doors, and I was going to now forever be a mental health advocate so I can help somebody, whether it be here today or standing in front of me with a hug or just picking up their child because they need 5 minutes. I am that person, and I just want to make sure I raise my kids in love and not hate. And if that's what I got to do, so be it. On February 15th, when I read my victim impact statement, he was punished with probation, and he is not allowed to be within the same area as me as a protection order, and he is not allowed to have any contact with me or my children, and anybody in his household is not allowed either. So that would mean my mom and my sister too. I have been diagnosed with PTSD and anxiety and depression. The PTSD is really strong with a lot of things from my abuse. I do have ADHD and impulsivity, so when my PTSD is prevalent, a lot of those other things come into play too. I am a mental health advocate, and I speak for Autism Speaks, and All Well Behavior Health and the case managing systems, they really came through the moment I called so I could regulate myself, so I could even talk to the police. It was difficult that day, I remember.